Hey everybody, I'm Hugh Brownstone for 3 Blind Men and an Elephant, and today I want to give you an early hands-on take, a preview really, of the just announced Leica M10 Monochrom. But before I do, I want to share with you, as I will do often in the coming days and weeks, that registration is now open for our 2020 Streets of New York Street Photography workshops, and I am stoked. Now, those of you who know me, or have attended, or have read some of the testimonials know why. These are life-affirming experience for attendees and for Claudia and I. Not that I'm biased or anything. It's a different kind of workshop, I think. A wonderful mix of technique, sure. Shooting and review, of course, lots of it. But also history, philosophy, ethics, and private tours not only of a couple of extraordinary photographic institutions, but the opportunity to visit iconic locations inhabited or shot by legendary photographers. It is also a lovely opportunity, though I really shouldn't say it quite like that, because it's actually central to the experience to spend time with a small, intimate group of like-minded people in the greatest place on earth, in my book, for the genre. Maybe rekindle your joy for the medium, perhaps even hone your artistic voice and ambitions. Incredible people, accomplished people, a diverse group of people, just plain nice people. Making it even more special, and with thanks once again to our friends at Hasselblad, we'll be holding our class sessions at their beautiful New York Experience studio in NoHo, perfectly located. Space is limited. A number of folks have already signed up. Thank you. Claudia and I are looking forward to meeting you. So if you're interested or want to learn more, please visit www.3bmep. Click on the link for workshops right there on the top menu or on the little hamburger all the way to the right. Or you can just find the link down below in the show notes. So, okay, back to the monochrome. Though I also encourage you to check out our previous videos on the M10, M10P, and M10D as well. That's because you can think of the monochrome as a 41 megapixel, black and white only version of Leica's already outstanding M10P, sans the left side top plate engraving, hold that thought, priced $500 more than the 8K already M10P and M10D for that matter. Capable of even greater detail and more nuanced tonality. This is possible not only because of the higher resolution sensor, but the fact that Leica taketh away with one hand and giveth with the other. These are the benefits of removing from the camera those things that are no longer necessary for black and white shooting only. Specifically, 1, the color array, and 2, the subsequently unnecessary vestigial debayering process. But in the end, that's neither here nor there. Let's leave theory behind for the real world. I spent 2 hours with the camera last week in New York, shooting with 3 different lenses, a Summachron M28, a black chrome edition Apo Summachron M50, and the brand new Summilux M91.5. Yeah, nosebleed expensive. To put it into perspective, the 19 grand you'd pay for the M10 Monochrome and that Apo 50 could just about snag a pair of actual medium format cameras with lenses, like the 50 megapixel, almost 6 grand Hasselblad X1D2 with their brilliant, almost 5 grand 81.9. And 102 megapixel autofocusing, in-body image stabilized, 10 grand alone Fujifilm GFX 100 with their GF63 2.8 for 1500. As I've said many times before, Leicas are not for everybody, especially this one, even more specialized than my favorite among current M variants, the M10D, but I do not begrudge Leica their pricing nor their target market. Though, since I just mentioned the Fujifilm GFX 100, let's dwell for a moment on Ibis. Right, I know. A number of us think real photographers don't need Ibis. I get it. I didn't need it for decades. But one can just as easily assert real photographers don't need lenses. A pinhole can do the trick. Of course, there is a hierarchy of needs, but in either case, technology allows the photographer additional tools and scenarios otherwise unavailable to him or her. More often than I'd like, to my chagrin, and beyond my limited skill focusing manual, at least with a rangefinder, I've been unable to take full advantage of high-resolution sensors, often because of the camera shake introduced at the slow shutter speeds needed to maintain base ISO, even with a steady hand. In my book, base ISO is always the way to go to obtain the best image quality from any camera, no newsflash. It isn't a big deal for 4K video, but it is for stills. It's not just the monochrome either. None of the M cameras have Ibis. Our CO doesn't have Ibis either. Neither does the X1D2, but our SL2 does. As well as autofocus. And 47 megapixels, give or take. Hold that thought. But with all of this as prelude, let's return to my experience shooting with the monochrome, during which I learned a number of things. First, God, the image quality can be extraordinary. Second, if you want to use any of these lenses wide open, you need better eyes than I do to focus it consistently. I repeat this because it is so important. If one is not up to the challenge, best to acknowledge it, be okay with it, and move on, as I'm trying to do. As I did do when I opted for the CL rather than the M10D, trading off cachet and full frame performance for an easier time of manually focusing M glass, adding autofocus into the mix as well as more glass for the money when I needed it, and then doing it all over again when I chose an SL2 over the same M10D that kept whispering sweet nothings into my ear for Ibis, weather sealing, autofocus, and what is bound to become a legendary optic, the Summicron SL35. My ambition with the monochrome was to focus exclusively via the rangefinder for the fullest M experience, but my previous dances with the M10, M10P, and M10D made it clear that I ought to bring along a VisiFlex Type 20 EVF as well, just in case, especially as I planned with lenses this rare, expensive, and fast to explore what they could do wide open, which is what I did most of the time, confirming that my focus was more successful when using the Type 20. The good news, of course, is that this is the first monochrome with which one can use the Type 20. But then again, candidly, I'd be more excited if I'd nailed focus with it every time, and I did not. Though your mileage may vary, hold this thought too. Still, third, as I assumed, if you want to get everything from this camera of which it is capable, there really is no point in attaching to it anything but the very best glass. Just chimping in broad daylight, for example, I can see the difference in contrast and sharpness between the 28 on the one hand and the Apo 50 on the other, which, when you consider the price differential, is a good thing. I'm pretty sure I wasn't suffering from confirmation bias. In fact, sure enough, the data from Leica's own MTF charts back up what I saw with my own eyes, which I didn't look at, by the way, until I got home. While the Summicron M28 is a lovely lens, handily outperforming the faster, wider, bigger, heavier, and more expensive Summilux M24, for example, the Apo Summicron 50 and Summilux 90 are in a different league, as, once again, they should be for the price. Fourth, irrespective of lens, I could also see immediately, without having to compare side by side, that the tonality of the monochrome is indeed richer and more nuanced than what I'm used to seeing from other M10 variants, other cameras. On the one hand, it reminds me of nothing so much as the 120 Acros film images from my 6x7 Bronica GS1, and on the other, Acros simulation on Fujifilm's X-T2. Fifth, still, candidly, for 99% of us, 99% of the time, it's a heck of a lot easier to get better photos with far less expensive autofocusing camera and lenses. Hold this thought too, even though, sixth, I do get that not every shot has to be tack sharp, nor even perfectly exposed for me to love it. Like this. Or even this, shot on my iPhone 11 Pro and heavily manipulated in post. Finally, seventh, my personal focusing issues and budget notwithstanding, for the right person, clearly for that rare person, the M10 Monochrome is awesome. The thing of it is, what those 2 hours really gave me was greater clarity about, you could say, for whom the M tolls. First, from this point forward, let's articulate what should be an obvious assumption. You want black and white only. Otherwise, this entire video is essentially moot. But let's also assume then, in turn, you already have at least one other camera that will capture color. Even so, if critical focus is important to you and you are intent upon shooting at or near wide open, especially if you tend to frame up very quickly, even more so if working with a fast-moving subject not moving parallel to the film plane, that is, moving toward you or away from you directly or on a diagonal, or you simply can't predict that movement, the likelihood that you achieve critical focus using either rangefinder or zone focus is sufficiently low, whether you have my eyesight or not. Camera lenses are so much better today. Those 41 megapixels will make non-critical focus that much more apparent, and most people never print images anyway, let alone print them large. That, as I implied earlier but will now assert explicitly, you are likely better off with even a $500 crop sensor autofocusing consumer camera from any of the major camera manufacturers. Not that this would necessarily be fun or enjoyable for you, I understand, but I suggest you do not underestimate either what a $1,200 or $3,000 camera with similarly priced lenses can do these days, be it something like our own Leica CL, a Panasonic Lumix GH5, 9, S1, S1R, Fujifilm X-T30, X-T3, X-Pro 3, Sony A6100 to who knows whatever, A7 III, A7R3, Nikon Z56-7. You get the point. If Critical focus is not a critical concern. And I get that too, as I said just moments ago. Well, you don't need 41 megapixels and you don't need 50% contrast at, say, 50 line pairs per millimeter at the edges either. That is to say, you don't need the most expensive, highest performance glass. Again, full props to Sony, Panasonic, Nikon, Fujifilm, Olympus, Canon. They are all putting out some fantastic lenses at much more reachable prices for most of us. If you want an M shooting experience and love the tiny jewel-like, relatively more affordable lenses in their catalog available for it, and want the look of 35mm film, like the Tri-X I used back in the day, for example, I understand this too, of course, you may well prefer the punchier images of the M10, M10P, or M10D, and or the economy of buying a used film M6, 5, 7, 3. You may even want to play with some of the recent manual focus Voigtlanders, like the 28mm f2 Ultron, because the lower resolution can make the result appear even more film-like. As in this. Or this. There really is room for lens character and imperfection in service of emotional impact, though personally, I'd rather introduce this kind of thing in post, unless I were in a very particular frame of mind. On the other hand, if you are all about landscapes, rural, urban, hey, suburban, exurban, sweet spot aperture shooting between f5, 6, and f11 to optimize depth of field, sharpness, and contrast. If you want to bring out the textures of buildings, bridges, forests, fabrics. If you love the look of medium format, but don't need to shoot waist level, and understand how to use longer lenses to achieve much of that effect. If you want to shoot in low light, wide open, or stop down, and have the time to frame up and slow down the shutter speed, say for a portrait shot where your subject has the time and will to hold a pose. Or have a vision, maybe, for an image of man-made or natural structures which are tack sharp while movement around, across, above, below, or through them is the point. If you want to travel light, small, and fast, at least compared to medium format. If you love that M experience and are comfortable with rangefinder or zone focusing, even focusing by rocking forward or backward a little bit on your feet at that point. Don't laugh, it works. If your eyes and reflexes are better than mine, and I'm sure there are plenty of you out there, and you have the budget for the body and the glass, and the travel, accommodations, food, donations to worthy causes like the victims of the Australian wildfires raging right now, for example. Then I can tell you, you'll love the monochrome. You will love it. Still, there are a few things, even for those of us who would love it, I'd really like to see addressed. First and foremost, and actually overdue, I think, a higher performance VisorFlex EVF. At least OLED, preferably 3.7 million dots like the Q2. Even better, the 5.7 million dot UXGA unit of the SL2. Second, a higher performance battery, especially important if Leica were to offer that higher performance VisorFlex. Third, and this is a nit, clearly, the iconic Leica wordmark engraved on the top plate, just like on the M10P. It's too beautiful not to be there. As I said, a nit. Okay, I think that's it for now. I'd like a lot more shooting time with the monochrome and the glass I do already own, beginning with my used but mint condition Summicron 50. I really want to explore and compare the camera's tonality in detail to the other M10s, or what I can create in post with our CL, SL2, maybe even an X Pro 3. I know it will lead me to shoot different things differently than I usually do. The real question, will the results grab me emotionally? To be determined. In the meantime, I think we'll be okay with the gear we already have.